So it's no secret that Hydra is by far the most powerful Sorcerer build right now for Season 9. However, there's actually another build that I've been really enjoying that actually not only shares a lot of gear with the Hydra Sorcerer, meaning that you don't actually have to swap out that much gear for your second loadout, but also is still quite strong, especially in terms of speed farming and power leveling, and just for a great change of pace should you want to play something other than Hydra. And what I'm talking about is none other than indeed the Meteor Sorcerer, which you can easily save another loadout to and kind of just swap between Hydra and Meteor as you see fit, or perhaps for example if you're just doing easier content like escalating nightmare dungeons or say even power leveling or speed farming through pits. Editor Lon here. So as I'm making this video, there's actually been a new development to the Meteor Sorcerer in that the skill damage is actually getting buffed further with the upcoming patch coming out next week, which is of course a very welcome change indeed, especially seeing as Meteor is pretty much the second best or like the next best Sorcerer build after Hydra. Really awesome here. I'm looking forward to seeing how much stronger it gets, and with that, let's get back to the video. And with that, going through some of the core things about the build, namely the mechanics and items, you definitely need, this is actually mandatory, the Starfall Coronet. This drops from the Beast and Ice boss, so you'll actually want to get this first and preferably get a good roll, say 2.5 seconds-ish on the charge replenishing on your Meteor's cooldown. You definitely want this before even thinking about running the build, because it turns Meteor into a skill with many charges that replenish over time instead of costing you mana. Next, for some other key pieces, you basically want to swap out, assuming you're playing Hydra previously, any of the conjuration stuff for more Meteor stuff, right? So on my staff, I actually have just opted to use a different staff other than my usual Hydra staff, because for the Hydra staff you want plus Hydra heads tempered. So I have another ancestral staff here. Here I've instead tempered for a chance for meteorites to deal double damage, and also used a different aspect called Shatter Stars, which of course is meteor related. For another meteor related aspect, I have Armageddon on my amulet. For my ring, I simply am using Storm Swell just for some increased damage whenever I have ice armor active. Talrashas is just a given for a lot of builds, including Hydra, so you can just keep it from your Hydra build. And then for gloves, instead of using the aspect where you're getting extra conjuration skills, you can just run Flash Fire. Or alternatively, if you're already running the critical strike damage variant of the Hydra build, as opposed to damage over time, you will already be running Flash Fire gloves anyway, right? As for the other parts of the glove, Pyromancy attack speed, and also just offensive tempering in general. Pyromancy attack speed is just strong for both Hydra and Meteor. You can get that on your amulet, your gloves, and your ring. And you also want plus core skills on your gloves, which again is shared between Hydra and Meteor. For some other stuff you can consider, you can use Tybalt's Will just to get a little bit of extra damage. Because for Hydra, you would rather be running Axial Conduit for resource gen, but here I'm running Tybalt's Will. For boots, it can actually be very similar. You'll be running the same aspect of Orange Herald, but for the affixes, you'll want +2 Meteor. And then for your chest, you can actually run the exact same, assuming you don't have like your uber unique Shroud of False Death yet. You can just run a legendary with the aspect of concentration, again, same as Hydra. And by the way, for any smaller details I don't cover in the video itself, you'll be able to find it in the character planner link in the description box below. But anyhow, for some of the most important interactions and just gameplay tips for playing this build, Inferno cooldown reduction is extremely important, hence running Orange Herald and maxing out the skill, because without Inferno, your meteors will be doing a lot less damage. Not to mention it also delivers vulnerable to enemies and pulls them in, and just groups them in together for your meteorites to bombard them. So having like almost perfect uptime on your Inferno is very, very important for this build, more so than for like Hydra even. And for that, for our runes real quick, you can definitely consider running the Zek rune, which reduces an ultimate cooldown whenever you trigger it. But if you already have enough cooldown reduction from other sources, eventually as your gear improves, you won't necessarily have to run this and can run like a damage oriented rune, right? Such as the Cax rune, QAX. And for the other rune, this is kind of an interesting choice. I've been recommended actually to run the Thor rune, and this actually allows you to trigger Frost Nova. So combined with Inferno grouping enemies together, and then using the Thor rune to use Frost Nova to also freeze enemies and deliver vulnerable, although your ultimate will already be giving them vulnerable. But a very interesting thing about this as well, besides using Frost Nova to crowd control and just stun enemies and just be safe, is that if you go to the skill tree and use Mystical Frost Armor instead of the other Shimmering Ice Armor, if you run Mystical Ice Armor, you actually will deal 15% multiplicative increased damage as well to frozen enemies. So this is just yet another way to multiply your damage, aside from just the other base benefits of the Mythical Frost Nova. So that's a really cool and powerful interaction too. And just combine that with like Teleport. Some people like to run the Teleport rune. That's generally the recommendation. I'm just running the Meteor enchantment for fun, but you can definitely run Teleport instead of that. And then Ice Blades is very strong as well, because you would be spending a lot of cooldowns with not only Meteor, but like a bunch of your other skills, right? So just have extra Ice Blades out, and then Ice Blades itself from the skill tree will be able to reduce your cooldown. So a big theme of this build is just cooldown reduction. I talked about having uptime on your Inferno, but also to reduce the cooldown on your Meteor is supremely important too, of course. Now, quickly going over some of the skill tree, most of it is pretty standard. I'll see if I can add more points into Elemental Dominance. It might actually be worth it. But I have points into Flame Shield, Teleport. I'm testing out Mystical Teleport to generate Crackling Energy, to then synergize with this passive down here, Convulsions, which gives you another damage buff whenever you collect Crackling Energy. And if you run the Paragon board, Thesis Conduit here, you'll actually be dealing even more damage whenever you have Crackling Energy, up to 60% multiplicative. So this is actually extremely strong. If you don't run Crackling Energy, you can also replace your Paragon board with something else and still get some decent damage, while also perhaps freeing some points from this like Crackling Energy synergy, right? But I think damage-wise, this is a really good option. I talked about the Ice Armor, Glass Cannons given. Ice Blaze is very good just for cooldown reduction. Moving on, Meteor is of course maxed out. Taking Mage's Meteor here instead of the Immobilize. Here you want Inner Flames as well as maxing out Devouring Blaze. Oh, by the way, having Devouring Blaze on your amulet is very strong as well, if you can get it. Otherwise, you can just run like Critical Strike Chance, percent Intelligence, and perhaps Attack Speed is actually pretty decent as well. Then here, last but not least, Infernal's maxed out. You get these Frost passives. Oh, this actually gives you further damage. I forgot to mention earlier regarding the Frost Nova synergy. This gives you extra damage against frozen enemies, so yet another reason to take the Thor rune for Frost Nova. And these two are pretty standard. Icy Touch and Permafrost, Elemental synergies, cooldown reduction from Evocation. I am running the Convulsions with Crackling Energy. And then here Soulfire is pretty decent too. And last but not least, we're taking Isu's Ferocity. Now for Paragon, there's a couple of ways to go about this, and you'll notice that I haven't collected all the runes yet. Anyway, you'll want Tactician on your starting board. And then moving on, I've taken Searing Heat, and then the rune I'm running with Searing Heat, the placeholder, but it should be Destruction for critical strike damage. Moving on, the next board is, the third board is Fundamental Release, very standard too. And then for the rune here, we're running Pyromaniac, and this is not a placeholder. The fourth board, it is Thesis Conduit, as I talked about before, with Flame Feeder, which I don't yet have. And then last but not least, Frigid Fate, combo with Elementalist, and this is also not a placeholder. Alright, and last but not least, for the Season 9 Horadric stuff, the season mechanic stuff, this is mostly very standard too. So you're running the gem where you're like just getting extra stats and are hindered and are getting hunted by like Jewel Guardians, and it's called Idol from Below. Next, this is also really standard, Scornful Light, and then Luminate Eye is actually kind of unique because again, of the importance of cooldown, but again, it's kind of your preference. L stuff, you can just run the Fire Jewel here. The other three are like super standard, I suppose. Bloody Charm, especially Bloody Charm and Fractured Core. The third one is more of a flex. You can do the Unstoppable, you can do like more survivability with like Bottled Wind or even Invigorating Helix. Or you could even do like the Frigid Heart here. And then for the spell, you can take Cosmic Anomaly. And really quickly about Mercenaries, since it's right next to this, you'll basically want to run Subo. This is also super standard. Subo for extra crit damage, and then Rahir. Or if you're a speed farmer, you can run like Variana for like extra speed or whatever. But Rahir is pretty cool here for the survivability with Bastion. Alright, and that's pretty much it for my very quick guide on the Season 9 Meteor Sorcerer. Super flashy, super fun build. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'll be sure to reply to your comment. And with that, happy hunting. Don't just be playing Hydra all the time. I personally kind of like the variety, but anyhow, with that, I will catch you in the next one. Not to throw any shade on Hydra though, I still think it's an awesome build. See ya.